I was introduced to specifically design thinking around the same time that I was introduced to this class that my wife and I ended up teaching that was essentially design thinking pointed towards self. And like, how do you take these concepts of creative problem solving and a human-centered approach to change? How do you take those and point it towards your own life in the ways that you live in the world?
I sure enough feel good. Yeah.
So I was teaching this class for 5 years that was asking the question of who am I, and then how do I then respond to that new content or that new understanding of who I am? How do I then live in the world? And really trying to dig back into our story and understanding like, where do we come from? Who are we? What are our natural tendencies? And then reimagining how that then helps us determine how we want to live. Because I think similar to design in general, where people think, when you say like, well, what is design? They think of things like Apple or like the layout of a magazine or a building or like kind of really big, clear things. But anything that has been created has been designed in some way, whether really intentionally or not. Like anything that is made has been designed. And I think as I began to have that realization around things like programs or furniture or handouts and worksheets, I was concurrently having that realization around, well, that also means any of the things that I'm choosing in my life, like I have that opportunity to just as intentionally design it. And so like the way that I spend my mornings, the way that I interact with myself, the way I interact with my family and friends, like those all are opportunities for like an intentional design process. Here's an opportunity to reimagine the as is. And that's like language that we use when we're working with clients and talking about there's a way that you're currently doing it, and perhaps there's some elements of that that just aren't working for the company or for the clients. And I think as we begin to slow down and look at ourselves, it's like there's ways that we're doing things that maybe just aren't working as well as we thought that they were. I think a lot about the relationships that I had 5 to 10 years ago and how that looks drastically different than the way that I approach relationship now, because I realize so much of it is choice. It's not just like, well, that's just the way that I am. Well, no, sure, that's the way you've been, but that also is like ripe for change. And if you have the energy and the desire to point towards that, I think there can be some really interesting growth edges that we can kind of pinpoint and then put the work in to see what could it look like? What could be different if I put the energy towards how I spend my mornings that I put towards how I design a program for a client?
Yeah.